Hi, I'm Isabel Rambrew, and I'm a part of the Youth and Government for Addison Trail in Addison, Illinois. We have a guest with us who came to talk with us and see what kind of stances she feels on our questions that we'll be asking.
Hi, I'm Angela Gonzalez, and I'd just like to ask you a couple questions.
Right.
And Giovanni Toledano.
I'm Isabella Gray.
And I'm Danny Carver.
And I am State Representative Kathleen Willis. Thank you guys for having me today. I am an open book, so let's fire away and see what you got for me.
In the terms of the vaping ban that's been going around, do you think that it will be strongly influenced nowadays and will be in place, or a law will be in place next year, the years coming, to stop it?
Okay, so that's an interesting thing. I actually, when I first got into office 7 years ago, that was one of the first pieces of legislation I passed, was an age limit on vaping. So at the time, there were no legislation on vaping. So back about 6 years ago, I passed that you had to be at least 18 in order to vape. Since then, we've seen a lot of stuff happening on vaping. One of the things that I have been working on and trying, and we finally got it passed last year, was to license vape shops to make sure that we could have some regulation in place in there. Since then, unfortunately, vaping has become a teen fad. And we've also seen that while teenagers may be cutting down on smoking, they're increasing their access to vaping. Even last year when we passed a 21, what we call tobacco 21, which included electronic cigarettes, we're still seeing underage vaping happening. We've also seen an unfortunate increase of illnesses and even deaths related to vaping. So with that in place, it's going to force us to act. Now, there's a couple of things that we're looking at. I don't think we're going to see a total ban on it, but I think we're going to see some very tight regulations. We're certainly going to see some increased scrutiny on the marketing techniques behind it. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some penalties for underage vaping put back into place. We had taken that away, and I think that was not necessarily a good thing. So we need to make sure that we do that. We also need to work really hard on black market access to vaping products, because really the majority of people that are getting sick are due to those that are from the black market. They're not from the shops. They're not regulated. We have seen many of those that have been sick are from THC-laced vaping products, and that actually coats the lungs and causes an increased problem. And that's something we're going to have to really crack down hard on. So I think we're going to see something. I don't know exactly what form it's going to be in, though.
Okay.
Along the lines of like the vaping thing, do you think there's anything that's going to happen like to try and like avoid the black market so like people aren't getting access to it? Like, is there anything coming for that?
Well, that's where we're doing a lot of, yes, we're doing a lot of regulations on the legal market and making sure we go that way. And we're going to come down harder on those that are selling it on the black market. So we're going to definitely work on that.
What's your opinion on the CPS strike?
So on the CPS strike, I do not represent the city of Chicago, but I am a strong union backer. I do believe that the CPS strike helped resolve some major problems that we saw in the Chicago schools. A lot of them, I do sit on the education and curriculum policy panel, and we actually had the CPS people out talking to us last week about a lot of problems that they're having with their special ed students and how they need to take care of that better. The CPS strike, or the CTU strike, because it's the Chicago Teachers Union, forced them to increase social workers in all the schools, which we need desperately. We need an increase in nurses in all the schools, because that is all that support system. And we need to have smaller classroom sizes. All of those things were accomplished by the strike. So I'm glad it was accomplished. I'm sad that it took so long to be resolved, but we'll see how that ends up going. But I think that it made the mayor, who made some promises, come through with her promises.
Okay, I have another question.
Sure.
So as you know, the law to legalize marijuana has been passed and will be in effect in January. How did you vote on that law?
So I voted in support of the law because I felt that we needed to recognize that marijuana is out there. Let's make sure that we can make it in the safest way possible. I don't necessarily feel it's a total gateway drug, but I do feel that it needs to have regulations in there. We also need to make sure that we have it as safe as possible, which means that we don't want to have people going to their corner dealer and getting it there, not knowing what the content is of it. So by going and legalizing it, we can make sure that we have some control over the content of it. My concern is, though, of people driving under the influence, and that continues to be a concern. We don't have a credible street way to monitor that, so we need to continue to work on field sobriety tests that we can go through. We're working on that. We've done a wonderful job of convincing and educating people about not driving under the influence with alcohol. We need to do the same with marijuana, and I think that's where we need to work on it. Continue to have those Lyft and Uber rides always available to you.
Relating to her question, do you support cities and villages having the right to ban dispensaries?
Well, I think that we do need to have cities and villages need to make the decisions that's best for them on that. My concern about those that ban them is that they're going to encourage black market sales in their communities. And so if they make it too difficult for people to get it legally, they're going to just go and get it black market wise. And that's not going to solve the problem. So I think we need to find cities and villages need to have control on where they're placed and to how many there are. Same way when we do with licensing for alcohol, for liquor stores, they can control that too. So I think we need to find a happy medium on there. Anybody that bans it, I think they're pretty naive to think that it's not going to be used in their town.
And then my other question is, what are your thoughts on Illinois giving undocumented immigrants driver's licenses?
So that was done before I got into office.
Right.
So that was done, I believe in 2010 was the year it was done. I think that it was done for a number of good reasons. It made sure that people that were driving anyways now are insured and know the correct rules of the road to be able to drive. So they have to still pass a test and they have to have insurance. So those are all good things that come through with it. I do recognize that many people have the misconception that because I have a driver's license, I can now use that for to prove that I'm a legal citizen. No, it does not. It clearly states that it's a TTYL is what it's called, or a TTYL. That is a temporary driver's license, that it is only used for driving purposes, and it does not give them identification purposes, does not give them access to voting or anything else that you need to have citizenship for. So, okay. Who's next?
There's a lot of difficult questions about the gender pay gap and how there's indifferences between women and men.
Mm-hmm.
What's your stance on that gap that there is?
I think we need to close that gap. I every year help sponsor on it's in March, which is called Gender Pay Gap Day, when women have to work that much longer than men in order to get at the same pay scale on that. Right now, we've done a lot for white women to be that, but women of color continue to fall lower and lower and lower. So African American women make 62 cents on the dollar. Latino or Latinx women make almost like 48 cents on the dollar to a white male. That is unacceptable, and we need to continue to work and advocate for that. We have put into place more and more legislation to try to get workers to do that, but we also have to make sure that we look beyond that. What are things that are preventing women, and specifically women of color, from advancing in businesses? How can we go and encourage that? And I actually have done a number of things where I work with, I'm part of the Latino caucus, even though I'm not Latino. The 77th district has a 52% Latino population. That means I need to advocate for those people that live in my community. So I'm a strong voice on that, on how we can go and increase better job accessibility, better education accessibility, all of those things that help us get to a higher pay scale, and that's what we need to do. We need to continue to, even though we make it illegal, it's still happening. We need to work on that, and so that's one of the things we do. One of the things I think I talked about earlier was, especially in the field of sports, you know, a big thing came out last year about the male soccer team and the women's soccer team, how the women's soccer team makes 2/3 of what the male soccer team does, and they have a better winning record. We need to stop that. We need to get it out in the public face and say this is unacceptable. Next.
What's your opinion on taxing the rich?
So, well, that's a loaded question, okay? Taxing the rich. I am a supporter of the fair tax, and that's one of the things that people will have a chance to vote on in November. And what the fair tax does is it's progressive tax. And it says those people that make more money should be taxed at a higher rate than those people that make lesser money. And that, I think, is a fair way to look at it. For those that have much, they should give much back. It is also important to realize that if we do a flat tax right now and everybody gets taxed at the same rate, when you look at the percentage of disposable income, it affects lower income families much more so. So the fair tax is coming up on the November 2020 ballot, and what it basically states is anybody that makes less than $250,000 will not see an increase in the amount of tax that they're going to pay to the state of Illinois. But those that make more than $250,000 will see an increase, and it will go up proportionately on that. So if you're saying, is that taxing the rich? Yeah, it is. But I also think that they have the ability to cover that, and I think it's a social responsibility to do so.
So do you support raising taxes on the middle class then as well?
No.
No, okay.
No, it's not going to raise taxes on the middle
Right.
class. So that's the whole thing on it. If we do a flat rate increase, that will raise tax on the middle
Okay.
class. So unless you consider people making more than $250,000 middle class. In my district that I represent, which is the 77th district, which does a portion of Addison, portion of Wooddale, all of Bensonville, North Lake, Stone Park, Melrose Park, Franklin Park, 99% of the people in those districts will see no increase if we pass a fair tax. And I think probably more than 50% of them I would classify as middle class citizens.
Where does so when you have this progressive tax in place, if it gets in place, where do these taxes where are these taxes going?
Where will it be going? It'll be going towards the state budget. So the plan is, if we pass this in 2020 and it goes into effect in 2021, it will bring an increase about $4 billion that we can put back into the state budget. That $4 billion will be divided into a variety of places. It's not going into one specific area, but it will be able to help pay down some of the pension costs. It will help with human service costs. It will help with education costs. All of those things combined are what we oftentimes do in the state budget. So it will not be part of what we're looking for capital plans, and we just passed a bill right now that was capital improvement plans, which will be doing a lot of building. That we had some smaller taxes that we put into that to help with that.
Is there anything that you would want to get done to help mental health awareness and help, especially with the current or the previous school shootings that have happened?
Okay, interesting. So I do a lot of work. I have actually, my passion the last 5 out of my 7 years in office has been to work on anti-gun violence issues. And a lot of that really stems from school shootings, mass shootings that are taking place, the wrong people having guns. So I am a strong supporter in better universal background checks. Better checks right up in the beginning. I have a bill right now that we passed out of the House, we're waiting for in the Senate, that requires fingerprinting on FOID cards so that we can do a better background check on it. I also am the chief sponsor of a bill that we passed last year 2 years now. It was the only gun legislation that was passed that a Republican governor signed. It was called a red flag bill, which was a firearm restraining order. It's a temporary restraining order on ownership of guns while people get mental health checks and make sure. So what it says is a family member sees this warning sign that there's something going wrong. It's not bad enough that you have done anything illegal, nor have you been put into a mental health home, but there's some concerns. You probably shouldn't have a gun readily available to you. We can temporarily take those guns away for 6 months' time while you get the health checkup you need. Now, I also am a strong supporter that we need to have more mental health availability services available. And so I'm a strong supporter of Haymarket coming into Itasca, which will be giving us more support there. I'm a strong supporter in what's called school-based health centers. So Proviso East has one of this, and they partner with Loyola. It's a health center right in the high school that also does social services work, has a psychiatrist available, a psychologist available, all of these things where the need is, and that's a strong support. I'm a strong supporter of that. We also need to really look at what are the causes of opioid addiction. And that's another reason why I support medical marijuana, because I think that can be used as an alternative to opioids, certainly on pain management. So that's a sort of roundabout, long question answer to a very complicated question.
Yeah.
So,
Do you believe that schools should be required to have gender neutral bathrooms for those who might identify as like
yes.
whatever they please?
Yes, I believe that, I think actually we passed a piece of legislation that said any establishment that has a single-use bathroom, it should be gender neutral. And I think that is something that we do. It's a safe place, you're not going in with a bunch of other people. Why do we have to have that restroom identified as male or female? And I think during high school years, many people are questioning, and I think we should make that time as easy as possible and safe as possible.
Do you believe that convicted felons should have the right to vote in state voting or federal
Okay.
voting?
Right, so we passed a law last year that allowed people that were incarcerated waiting for trial to be able to vote. And I was a strong supporter of that, and I believe strongly in that, especially for the fact that people are innocent until proven guilty. So just because you're in a county jail during the election time doesn't mean you should not be able to vote, especially if you have not had your trial, because you are innocent until proven guilty. After you've served time and you are out, and you are off probation and everything, I do believe that your voting rights should be restored to you. I think that all of your other responsibilities are there. You have to pay taxes, you have to pay your mortgage, you have to do everything else. You should have a right to vote also.
On that note, do you think that a convicted felon should be able to run for a role in office or anything of that sort?
I think that depends upon what the charge was. So I think that's something we have to look at. So there are times when you might be a convicted felon because you did embezzlement and stuff like that. So I don't think in that case you should be able to run for an office where that would be you'd have access to money and finances. So that's a tricky thing. I also think that if you are a convicted child molester, you already are, for life, you are on the sexual predator thing, and therefore you cannot really be on a school board because you're not allowed in a school. And so there are certain things and certain times when I think that it should not be. But I also feel that there are times when we're working on right now, there are licenses that you are prohibited from getting, professional licenses, if you have a felony. And it's very open as to what the felony is. So if you did a shoplifting charge that ended up being a felony charge when you were 18 or 19, when you're 25 and you decide that you've picked up your life and gone better, you right now under current law cannot get a nursing license because of that. So there needs to be ways that we can fix that and look at each case on an individual basis and look at that so we can not have somebody that made a mistake young in their life have doors slammed in there later on as they've learned to pick themselves up and learn from their mistakes.
I have a question regarding the legalization of marijuana from
Okay.
earlier.
Mhm.
So as it becomes legal January 2020, will
Mhm.
people with prior convictions be
So, yes, well, that's an interesting. So there is a whole big part of that bill to expunge small possession charges and get that out of there. So if you were convicted of being a dealer, that's not going to be expunged. But if you got busted for having a small amount on you, that will be expunged from your record. And so that is a huge part of what we put forward on that, because it seems pretty crazy to say, well, okay, I get it was illegal then, but now it's legal, but I still have this illegal charge following me. So yeah, there'll be an expungement that's taking place. The idea behind it is that it's supposed to happen automatically and with no charge or no need to get involved with a lawyer. We're still waiting to see if that's going to happen. And I think it's going to take a while for all of those old charges to get expunged, but we're working through that.
So, being an alumni of Addison Trail, what is one memory that you'll never forget throughout your 4 years?
One memory I have a lot of them, but I think probably the most fun and happy time was my junior year. Interesting enough, I was never elected to student council, but I had a lot of friends that were. So one of my best friends was the class officer, and we decided junior year, the theme for the homecoming parade was Disney and Disney movies. And so we made a Dumbo elephant out of paper mache in my garage, and that was when we did homecoming parades down Army Trail Road, and we got to do that. So that was a lot of fun. And my dad, who is a machinist, had a blast helping us. So it was a lot of fun on that. So that was probably one of my best memories.
What clubs were you involved in, if you were involved in?
I was involved, like I said, I wasn't never on student council, but I had a lot of friends that were. I was in youth and government, Model UN, library club, which I think was a club I made up my own on. I was also in, Model UN, youth and government. I was a thespian, so I was involved in that. That was pretty much it. For some reason, I did not do Key Club. I don't know why. I was like the super volunteer, and I was also in NHS, so I did that too.
Did you have any specific, anyone who impacted you in your high school years?
Yeah, Mr. Jarris was my social studies teacher, and he was the sponsor of Model UN in youth and government, and he was a young teacher. It was one of his first few years when I was there. He was really fantastic, really impacted me a lot through stuff. I really enjoyed that. I also remember, I don't know, this is a chemistry teacher from way back, Mr. Podian, who was crazy. He was absolutely insane, but we had a blast in that class, and it made chemistry bearable, so there was no doubt about that. So.
Did you play any sports in high school?
No, I was not sports talented. Throughout all my years, one year I tried out for basketball when I was in 8th grade, and I got on the team only because there were so few people that tried out. But I was always there to cheer on. So I did go to almost every football game, went to a lot of basketball games, a lot of volleyball games, but I was not very athletic.
So you're like a state representative.
Mm-hmm.
So what would your not like words of advice, but like if someone wants to, oh my gosh, if one day someone wants to be a state representative, anything.
How would I guide them to there? So I didn't come straight as a state representative. I was always involved in the community, and I think that's what you need to do. So you should always be involved in the community, and the people that are more involved in the community can oftentimes tend to go on to other things that they wanted to. So when I moved back to Addison and started to raise my family, I was involved in PTA and Scouts, a lot of community things. The Addison Community Council that used to run the parade that we used to have in town, I was involved with that, got involved in Kiwanis. And then I was elected to our local school board. And I think that's important. All politics start local, and that's what I think is the most important thing to see. You know, you get the national always makes the newspaper, even state oftentimes makes the newspaper, but local politics is really what has the most effect on the community. And so that's what I did with the school board. I wanted to be involved in something that really had an effect. So I was on our school board, and so that was truly important. You understand budgeting and where money comes from and taxes and the impact of that when you do something like that, whether it's the school board, the library board, the park district board, those all have close impact. And then it was just by circumstances that we did a redistrict in the area. Somebody called me up and said, "You interested?" And I'm like, I don't know, am I? And next thing I knew, I was running for an office at state level. Very happy to do it, I love it. I wish I had done it years earlier, but I'm not sure I would have had the time and the energy to do it years earlier, but it was just, everything was at the right time in the right place. So be involved. I also would tell people that have an interest in politics, volunteer to help somebody on their political campaign, work with them on that, understand the backside of it. It's not all glamour. A lot of it is knocking doors, having people slam doors in your face and not be always nice and friendly. But it really gives you a chance to get to meet the people, understand what the job is. And so if you do have an interest in politics, I would say, you know, talk to one of your elected officials, even if it's somebody on your school board, park district board, you know, volunteer to help over the summer, even in a non-election year. To many offices, I always get interns that come and help out, help with events that we do in the community. Those are all great ways to understand the job better and know what you're getting into. So, all right, well, thanks guys. I've enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you.
I am honored to be able to be the Alumni of Distinction this year. It is a thrill to do that. I know I'll see you all tomorrow on the assemblies, and you can have more questions for me then, but it's been a blast. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.